Rise of the Orc Lords. It's time for the Decembork After Action Report. We're a little overdue. I needed some time to let it steep, figure out what I wanted to say, what I wanted to tell you guys about this. Not a whole lot of visually stimulating and interesting stuff. I'll throw some orc-like memes up just to keep it interesting. Way back in November, I promised you I was going to let you know what happened here in this game. This is kind of a hex encountery RPG. Me and 12 bros decided to get together and have some fun in December by engaging in tabletop hijinks. There's no tabletop. It's all done digitally. Go read orclords.blogspot.com for the day-by-day, blow-by-blow account of what happened. This video is really kind of about what we were hoping to accomplish. Did we accomplish it? And, what did we learn along the way? And so, spoiler alert, Porcus Orcus won, and it was mixed results. We had a great time, so, if you're one of those, as long as you're having fun, you won, dopes, then yeah, we won the game. But, you can enjoy yourself and still admit, yeah, I got beat fair and square. 11 guys here did. They seemed to have a good time. They reported back that they enjoyed themselves, and we learned from the experience. We don't shy away from failure here at the House of Wargaming. We understand that failure is just one step on the staircase to success. So with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and talk about what we're hoping to accomplish here. This is kind of ancillary to the Bro SR, guys playing D&D, AD&D at a very high level. We wanted to have a month-long extravaganza, high-intensity gaming. And one of the things that we discovered is a month is a really good unit of time. This kind of game demands a lot of focus and a lot of attention, even using today's sophisticated communications tools like Twitter, Discord. That's primarily how we communicated in Decembork. Lesson number one, don't do this in December. The birth of our Lord and Savior is coming up at the end of the month. People got Christmas concerts. Their kids are busy. They're doing the shopping. They really don't have time. What are you doing, you maniacs? But particularly the GM, that would be me. December's not a great month. And some of the guys really couldn't dedicate their full time early on, and that Caleb, Sivor, Khalid, they got obligations, responsibilities. But everybody has those, and, everybody gets it, so no hard feelings across the board, even with all of the skullduggery and betrayals along the way. But we'll get to that in just a moment. The other thing that we're going to go through some of the lessons learned as far as the game write-up and how we did this, but to fill you again, just to remind you of the idea here, is that there's a dark tower here, and the Lord of the Tower says to all of his orcs, the month of December, whoever brings me the most tribute gets to be the leader of the Orcish crusade against the forces of goodness, decency, and light. And all 12 of these guys want to be the Orc war chief because they'll get to command all of the other guys in taking out the human city of Carnadium. Now, there's also some elves, there's Goblin Town, and there's Kortorgan, which is where the dwarves live. Those are your sources for slaves and gold. However, after the first week, there's a whole bunch of other sources of slaves and gold. In fact, everybody starts with gold. Now, we did a draft, and we did it live here on the channel, and it went really well because it provided for all 12 of our participants to have a balanced, though asymmetric force. Some of them started with more troops, some of them started with better special abilities, some of them started with better locations. Sivor Khalid started with the speedy guys. He had like 60 hit dice worth of orcs that could travel 2 hexes per day. So that helped because he was able to do some lightning raids. Hollyfeld way down here is far, he's got a 6-day trek just to deliver his loot to Malturum. And he's got to worry about defending his turf at the same time. You're going to need some allies for that. Same thing with Lorimus and Porcus Orcus. Now, Porcus Orcus, his special ability was Goblin Friend. If he goes to Goblin Town, he can just recruit goblins. He doesn't have to fight them. He doesn't have to risk anything. They just say, yeah, we like you, bro. He put together a solid plan. He put together something called the Southeastern Conference. And unlike college football, the GM in this game doesn't provide tons of favorable matchups and then only measure the conference against itself and then go, wow, they're really good. You can tell because they're really good against each other. We try to do things fairly and openly and honestly. And those of you that think that that's kind of out of line, just remember the guys that write about this stuff, the sports analysts, they're journalists. Okay? We all know what that means. Terrible people, some of the worst. Be that as it may, let's get back on the subject here. Porcus Orcus said, look, here's what I'm going to do. Got Chris, Cull, we're going to go hit Goblin Town. And he messaged me, the guy running Porcus Orcus said, hey, look, I've got a wizard. I'm going to be casting invisibility on me and a couple of my bros, and I want to kill the leader of Goblin Town and take it over, and just suddenly I have got all the goblins. Now, this is a very high-risk, high-reward situation. Kind of outside the bounds of the rules as written, but I mentioned to the guys, look, I'm using hit dice, and I'm using shamans, and I'm using my foundation for this game is still the Monster Manual. First edition AD&D. So when Porcus said, can I take over Goblin Town? I said, yeah, I'll allow it. I mean, there's a chance you're going to die. But I will use, and here's one of the genius bits about the Dungeon Master's Guide. Everybody complains, this again is a brief aside, everybody complains, well, it's all these subsystems. Now, first of all, subsystems are good. They keep things fresh. Modern D&D is all roll a d20. If it's high, it's good. If it's low, it's bad. Total snooze fest. It's always the same thing. AD&D, it's always something new, always something different. And the beauty of all of these subsystems is that you can carve them out, pick them up, and drop them into a whole different game, and they work just as well. So I used the assassination rules. I said, Porcus, you're about a 6-hit die beast. Goblin King is going to be, the mayor of Goblin Town, we actually called him, is going to be about 3rd level. So you and your boys, I'll give you, and I even gave him a little boost because he had a solid plan. He walked me through. We're going to be invisible. We're going to sneak in. Call Chris. My boys are going to be launching a raid, and during the raid, that's when we're going to strike. I said, great. You got about a 50-50 chance that this is successful. It was barely successful. I think I rolled like a 52 or something ridiculous like that. And I said, okay, now the mayor of Goblin Town is dead. And Porcus, the goblins realize that you have betrayed your ally, but they're not sure exactly what to do. And the guy playing Porcus said, well, listen, I'm going to give a rousing speech about the new era of orcish goblin friendship. I said, okay, well, how am I supposed to know how the mayor's bodyguards and the sub-chiefs in Goblin Town, the deputy mayors, how are they going to respond to the fact that their ally has seized, he's launched a coup? And the answer to that is kablam, right here. The Dungeon Master Guide. It has roll 2d6. And if it's 12, it's a positive. And if it's a 2, it's completely negative. You've got your reaction counter. So what a wonderful gift Gygax gave us. So I rolled my dice, and it came up kind of mixed. Shaking the magic 8 ball came up unclear. Ask again later. I said, all right, fine. I'll roll again. And this time it was kind of negative. All right, now we need to interpret what does kind of negative mean. And I decided that what this meant is that they're not happy about it. Now, they're not really upset. So why would they be kind of mixed on whether this is a good thing or bad thing? And the obvious explanation is that the deputy mayors have their own politics going on. All of the politics going on here in the steppe lands between the orcs is also going on here within the Goblin Town hex. The deputy mayor turns to Porcus and says, thank you for eliminating my rival for power, GTFO. And so the goblins attack Porcus Orcus. And now I said, well, how do I know whether the guy escapes or not? Well, again, kablow, it's right there in the DMG, and he barely escaped with his life. So Porcus Orcus manages to get out of Goblin Town, and the player says, but I'm still Goblin Friend, right? And I was like, no, dude, you just betrayed them. They hate your guts now. And he said, okay, fine, I'm going to go hit him. Now, here's where something gets interesting. So that was all very successful. The Southeastern Conference is doing great. Then they hit Ogma, or Weema, that's this guy here. It's still week number 1, by the way, and they trounce him. And this was part of Porcus's plan. He says, listen, if I take over this town, can I make this town my new base hex? I said, yeah, sure. So all 3 of these orcs wipe out Weema, and he did everything he could. But, when you've got being dogpiled 3-1, or pigpiled as the case may be, what are you going to do? So he had pretty good nature about the whole situation. He said, it's fine, or whatever. But now I got 3 orcs inside, what we called it Old Ogma Town, and this is Old Porcus Town. And he said, well, good. There's some things I want to do. I said, whoa, slow down there, Cochise. And I had to establish right away that after you raid, you got to back out. You got to recover, sort your stuff, and then you can go back in. So this is another case where I told all 3 guys, look, one of you, you guys have to decide who is really going to be the guy. And fortunately for Porcus, Cull and Chris both went, yeah, I'm just going to go cash out at Mount Turum. And here's where things get interesting. When you have early successes, in this particular game, for every 1,000 gold that you add in, that you pay tribute, 50 dudes spawn in your base camp. And for every, I think it's like for every 100 slaves, no, it's every 100 hit dice of slaves, you get 50 dudes come to your town. So Porcus said, look, I'm going to hang on to my goblins because they fight just as powerful as orcs. But I'm going to cash in everything I can, and my boys are going to spawn right here. Oops. Because there were, the next day, because we had 3 guys and Porcus didn't have time to like tear down Uema's banners and rearrange the furniture, they spawned down here. Ba-dum-bum. That's okay. He's still got his reinforcements down here. So he goes and gets up to other hijinks. Lorem Ipsum winds up coming down here, and he gets hit by, I think it was Garrick and Rockbrain, and the war chief gets killed because of, and now we should probably take a look at our combat tables. The way combat works, a couple of things to be aware of, and this gets very important. Every day that you've got raiders out in an open hex or in the swamps, which no one went into, it's a shame, there's a chance for a random encounter. And here's where things get interesting. Porcus now is running around with a whole bunch of goblin slaves because he wants to use those for raiding Carnadium and attacking other guys. And one of the other, I don't remember who it was. I think it might have been like Rockbrain, or maybe it was Cull. He hit one of the random items, the random encounters that said all your goblins escape. Like all but 20 of your goblins escaped. And I didn't realize at the time what a big deal that would be for guys who went with the full goblin force. Porcus was able to steamroll the second half of the campaign because he had so many goblins. But the whole time he's doing that, in the back of his mind, he's thinking about that first week when somebody had all of his goblins run off. If that had happened, and that's really one of the things I want to hammer home, is that although at the end of the day, the scoreboard was something like 400 points to Porcus to 200 points to the next guy, the game was a lot closer than the final score indicated, because later on, something else interesting happens, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about the game design, because we already talked about how, Uema Town got turned into New Porcus Town. And there's some other things we should talk about with, but I'm having a great time. This is an interesting experience. So this is the standard combat results table that I put together for the orcs on Decembork, right? And this is pretty easy, right? If you've got the same number, back up. If you are defending your home hex, you've got walls, you get to add a 50% bonus. If I've got 200 dudes in there, they're going to fight like 300. Which causes some headaches, because it means if you want to attack somebody, we've got the attacker-defender ratio. If your orcs are attacking an even number, and it has to be a full double up. So in other words, I want to have a 2-to-1 ratio, because I want to roll a d6 on this column. This is a better column. The more you outnumber your enemy, the better. If I'm attacking a guy out in an open hex, and he's got 100 dudes, then I only need 200 guys to double him up. If he's in his home hex, I need 300 guys. That's by design. One of these old boys, and I think it was Rockbrain. Yeah, Rockbrain did something interesting. He had stone walls. He had engineers. He said, one of his abilities, he actually laid a booby trap here in Hex 4-3. If anybody came in there, they'd find the Cave of Wonders, which had a little bit of gold scattered around the mouth, but mostly it was traps. That thing sat there until like the last week when Sivor Khalid finally ran into it and explored it and lost some dudes, and whoops. So we had some fun throwing some random stuff down. Be that as it may, we're talking about this. So really, the idea behind this is that, you don't want to attack at even odds. You want to gather an alliance together. 3-on-1 turns things to your favor. And the way this table works, we should actually go through this. We roll a d6. So if you're attacking and you outnumber the guy 2-to-1, we roll a d6, and if we roll a 3, the attacker loses 40% of his force. The defenders lose 60%, but look at this. They also lose. So you lost 40% of your dudes, but you stole a quarter of the gold, 25%. And half of the guys that were lost, you actually took them, and they joined you because they were so impressed with your battle prowess. You get down here, and down here, look, you steal all the gold. And, well, in this case, if you've got a 3-to-1 ratio, you kill all of the defenders. But in this case, not only do you steal all the guy's gold, but you kill all his, wait a minute, the defender loses all of his dudes, and look at that. You stole half of his dudes join your force. So you really want to be as far over here as possible. That's the way this worked. I think it worked great. Worked out really good. A single D6 roll, pretty big swing, but again, like if you're outnumbered 1-4, this is not good, man. On a roll of a 1, you've got a disaster, and that means that you lost everything, right? The best you can hope for is half your guys die, you kill half of his, and then you steal quarter of his gold and quarter of the survivors join you. You can run away at that point. So that's kind of how that table worked. It worked great. Let's take a look at this table now and why it was a failure. The difficulty with this table, it works the same way, except now we've got different results where the orcs, the reasoning behind this table was, what if you encounter some elves, let's say? And most of these random encounters were designed to kind of chip away at you. Not game breakers, not going to destroy you, they're just going to whittle away your power. So some of the other things that happen is guys would have wagons break down, and they wouldn't be able to move. If they had any treasure wagons, they couldn't move for one day. In this case, we didn't want the random encounters to completely blow somebody out of the campaign. So that's what this was designed to do. Very rare that the orc force would be wiped out. Typically what would be happening is your orcs, you would have to be outnumbered 4-1, which would be pretty rare. I made the mistake of using this for orc on orc violence because it was not very rare that you would have 3-1 odds that 2 orc forces would meet, and you'd be rolling over here. Enemy eliminated, half the force surrenders into slavery. And guys were not parceling out 2 to 3 armies. They were rolling with as many guys as possible. Now that's smart play, but it means that we were typically rolling over here on these deadly columns here, right? So really, at the end of the day, what I would do if I were to do this again, I would have a third table that was balanced entirely differently so that when 2 orc forces met, it was a little more explicit about who is the attacker, who is the defender, and I would kind of jigger the results, right? Enemy retreats after killing 10 hit dice of orcs. I mean, that's this enemy retreats diagonal here. Well, I mean, what if I've got 2 orc forces of 400 versus 300, and it's 10 orcs? Come on. Now, the enemy retreats does make a big difference, and at this point, we should probably talk about the weekly turns. And the idea behind weekly turns was to kind of minimize the amount of time that you would spend on this game. Turn length is critical for games like these, particularly if you're trying to game in 1-to-1 time, which we weren't. It very quickly, like Thanksgiving, became obvious to me that we were going to encounter a lot of checkpoints during each of the weeks that would slow down the resolution. Bear in mind, we've got 12 players, we've got 30 armies, we've got all over the place. That's 30 chances at random encounters, which were pretty rare early on. They started popping up more later. You've got to worry about who's in the force, orcs, and how many goblins, and do they have any treasure, and what are the orders, what are their intention, where are they going? And different players would have different ways of explaining their intentions. Holyfeld might say, look, I'm going to raid this hex in Carnadium, and I'm going to go to Malturum and cash out. Now I, as the GM, have to interpret, well, that's 1-2 raid, that's on day 2, and then is he going to take the northern route or the southern route? And if I ask him that question, I ask him today, he answers tomorrow. Well, now I got a full day that I can't really resolve what's going on in this section of the map. And you can't resolve this section for the week and then worry about what comes up here. You really need, there's so much information, you got to take it one day at a time. So as a GM, I said, look, I would love to publish one result per day, but there's just no way to do that and get this resolved and to give you guys the time you need. So the original plan was you get your orders in by Friday night. I take Saturday and Sunday and I resolve the first 3 or 4 days. And then if we have any questions, then I can ask you that. And Monday, Tuesday, we can resolve the kind of second half of the week. And that gives you a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that you can talk to the other players, formulate some plans, get your orders in. Didn't work that smooth because we're good guys here. We don't want to penalize anybody because they're busy with work or they're visiting families. And so, some of these guys haven't played in a game like this before. So Sivor Khalid in particular, his first week, he was a little late because of, family obligations. So I said, all right, you know what, we're just going to raid Core Torrigan for you. Or he had orders to come down here and patrol. And it was a little unclear on how patrolling worked. And so I kind of took control. I'll be honest with you, he kind of started on the back foot. And all things considered, he did a bang-up job. He finished somewhere around the middle of the pack. No shame in that, particularly when you're trying to overcome all these earthly challenges, the real world challenges. So no shame in that. And again, Caleb Gines, he was kind of distracted the early part. His special ability, and interestingly enough, he nailed it. He was the elf killer. For every left elf ear he turned into Malturum, he would get I think it was 10 gold or something like that. And so he wound up killing half the elves in Nairobi. If he had just gone with that, and how interesting. He wound up in the location next to the elves where he could just hunt them all down. Now, the elves didn't pay out very big, but they were consistent. And like I said, he did reasonably well for himself. He also hit, here's another little interesting side thing. He hit, while he was out running around, and he was in this area, the random encounter he discovered was a treasure map. I said, look, and that treasure map is great. If it comes up, I will roll 2d10. The first die will be the column, and the second die will be the row. It turned out that treasure was right here, right next to his hometown. This is week 4 now. What are the odds? I thought. But then I started looking at it a little more, and I thought, well, wait a minute. If you find a treasure map, you've got your home hex plus 6 around it. That is a 7% chance that treasure is on or next to your home hex. If you count these hexes, it winds up being something like this guy here. I mean, this is 1 plus 6 plus another, 15? It's like a 1 in 5 chance that treasure is within 2 hexes of your hometown. Unfortunately for Caleb, he had suffered so many losses, he did not have a spare force that he could send down. There was only 6 days left. He had just enough time to do one more big raid on Canadium and get back to Malturum. And besides, he thought, there's a chance that's an elf trick. He doesn't know I'm rolling 2d10. He just knows that he's got to, and he saw the Cave of Wonders. He saw that happen, and he was rightfully suspicious. It never occurred to me that he would be suspicious, but looking back, it's natural he would. So he left 2,000 gold. That's 20 points sitting on the table for valid reasons. And like I said, he did a good job in that room. Now, I didn't tell these guys, if you completely wipe out the elves or the goblins or the dwarves, if you steal all the dwarf gold, you have removed a thorn in the Dreadlord's side, he will give you 5 bonus points. I didn't tell him that, but it makes sense. I had that written down on the rules. And there were a couple of guys who were like, oh man, I wish I'd known. And I'm like, well, you should have thought about it because it makes sense, right? Anyway, moving on, we did have an alliance over here that got together. Oh, so the other big thing I want to tell you about is that we had a magic portal open right here. What a curious place. So as Porcus is wandering through here, he finds what's called the Dark Portal. And I think it was one of these 2 hexes. That Dark Portal would, when you moved into the hex, on your next move, you could go direct to Malturum. One way, do not pass go, cash in your gold, collect $200. Very curious that it appeared right here between Carnadium and Malturum. Happened fairly late in the game, and it became a predictable location for people to fight over. You could save a day's travel, and it became very safe. If I could get to that hex, the next day I could move to Malturum. And so that wound up with a late-game scrum. Now, before that happened, we did have the Alliance wiped out Grimdark Morbad. Grimdark's whole strategy, I think it was Grimdark and Klon, these guys, they were like, look, they looked at the rules for raiding people, and they went, Carnadium's where the big money is. I'm right there, bro. And they just kind of went back and forth, cashing out. Exponential growth. Every time they did that, bing, they'd get reinforcements that would allow them to make a bigger raid on Carnadium. As it is, these guys all teamed up, and thanks to listening to Porcus Orcus, they wiped out Grimdark Morbad. Porcus said, cool, I'm moving into new Porcus Town. As he did that, he wound up, these guys, it was like the last week, and they were like, hey, you know what? If we gang up on Porcus Orcus, one of us could win. So they had a great plan where they were like, let's just go beat up the guys that are here, and then whoever survives will fight each other, and then whoever's left standing will obviously win the game. It was a good plan, but it failed because Hollyfeld was the weathermancer. And 3 times during the month, well, first of all, I told him when it would rain, so he could predict when no treasure wagons would be able to move. Then he had 3 options of nobody can move through my hex today. And he used that to good effect on the magic portal. He combined different rules of the game to create new effects. And he was able to put together a solid plan with Porcus to slow down the treasure wagon. And this was kind of that like second checkpoint that as the guys that raided Carnadium, and they destroyed it. They like completely took everything out of it. And as they were moving, they were literally one turn away from getting a massive reinforcement boost that would have put him over the edge. As it was, because Porcus got Holyfeld to use his create a blizzard on the magic portal, nobody could get through the magic portal, and instead it was a massive battle royale there in the magic portal. After the fight was over, if I remember correctly, Holyfeld went, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do that, and he attacked Porcus. So there was a very real chance that Porcus could have lost one of those fights. As it was, he didn't, and he wound up like, not only that, but the big thing was, by rolling on this table, if he had gotten the result that said, destroy the enemy or enemy retreats, then that would have been, that would have been one thing. But instead, he got the half the enemy force surrenders into slavery. I think they were fighting on the 3-1. So there was a 1 in 3 chance of that happening. See the EE? If half the enemy force had not surrendered into slavery during the first fight, then Porcus would have been fighting on a worse odds. And I remember looking at it and going, man, son of a gun, you know what? By rolling that critical EE now, he has enough forces to move the 1 column shift that allowed him to basically just suddenly, and because he was at the portal, the very next day he was able to go, bing, turn his stuff in. And then the next day, I think it was like the last day, on the last day of the month, he had just an enormous reinforcement show up. And then then it was that last kind of process of, all right, whatever you control, wherever it is on the map, if they're under your banner, you get points for it. And that was really why it looked like Porcus won bigger than I think he really did. At the end of the day, there was something like 3,500 orcs left on the map. Like 60,000 gold had been extracted from all of these stunties and the pink bellies and the goblins. And so now we've got a situation where we've got these steps. And Porcus Orcus comes to me and says, hey, so I'm the war chief, right? Yeah. Well, what if I want to take these orcs out into one of the other campaign worlds? My response was, so Porcus said, well, which campaign world is this in? Is it in Dubzaron? Is it in Trollopolis? Is it in, in the wherever, Red Frontier? And I said, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in any one of those worlds because you got a magic door, bro. If the Dread Lord is a great and powerful sorcerer, march them through that magic portal. They can go anywhere you want. And suddenly this becomes part of a much broader, wider-reaching adventure. Suddenly you've got an orcish crusade marching, hither and yon. But of course, you got to talk to the guy running that campaign world. He may not want this to happen. Now, one other thing I should point out is that the Dreadlord was responding to the call of I can't. What's her name? Lamala. That's what she's called in Dubzaron. He was responding to Lamala's call for aid, and then the burning of Carnadium. It could, if you squint your eyes right, say that it was part of Lamala's curse, and it would extend the blood rain that we saw in like Brovenloft and all over the place by another month. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I kind of lost track. I said, hey, look, it's possible. And honestly, the guy that's gets to make that call, B-Dubs, he said, I don't see it. All right, fine, you don't see it. It's just not, it's, the offer's on the table, and it makes things interesting, and, the choice is entirely yours. It's your campaign. Do what you will with it. But what we did was had a great time with this. Like I said, we had lots of skullduggery. We had lots of betrayals. We had lots of guys. And then one other thing I'll point out, just kind of excuse my own behavior. Part of the rules were, listen, you've only got your war chief, you've got 2 sub chiefs, maybe 3, and then your wizard. I did have guys come to me and say, hey, I'm right next to it. Can I just send my wizard with all that money to the Black Tower? And I was like, no, you're one guy. Well, what if I just send like 1 or 2 guys with 10,000 gold? No, we're playing fast and loose with the wagons. I don't want to have to track all those treasure wagons. I got enough to track. It took like 3-4 hours to resolve. I think it was like 2 hours to resolve the first day and then 2 for the second day of the week. Forget it. There are treasure wagons and you got to protect them, but there's limits to what guys can carry. Ultimately, I think I let Sivor's Wolf Riders carry 100 gold each, so he could run some pretty quick shuttles down to Malturum, but still it was limited to like 500 or 600 gold per trip. Not game breaking. I did have guys say, well, I've lost my all of my sub chiefs. What do I do now? Or, they had their one sub chief at home and they said, look, why not, can I please take all of my guys out of the home? And I was like, yeah, you can, but, so here's how this works. Yes, but this is kind of a standard operating procedure for most like OSR D&D tables. Yes, but when your player wants to do something, you say yes. However, there's a condition. And so in this case, almost from the word jump, when guys wanted to leave their home turf undefended, I said you can do that, but I will roll random encounters for your home turf. And if it hits, and if it's appropriate, you are going to lose your hometown. And if you don't have a hometown, when you cash out, you don't get reinforcements. They're just lost. So what happened with that is, this town was left empty for a while. This town was left empty for a while. Like Lorem Ipsum, the war chief, died. So he had like 100 guys running around selling their services to the other orc lords. We had random encounters show up. They were human crusaders. They moved in. Oh, it happened to Chris Carnell too, now that I think about it. And Chris was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. All right, fine. I'm going to leave my treasure. I'm going to go into this hex, the piece of the Dread Tower. But I'm going to leave the treasure there with like 50 orcs, like 50 hit dice worth of orcs. And then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to beat up the humans that moved into my town. And then I'll cash out, and then I'll get my reinforcements. So there was some interesting hijinks going on within the NPCs within the game. Whenever I had a Crusaders and the human Crusaders, if they spawned with you, right? And they had to spawn in the presence of an orc force. If your orc force had a wizard with them or a shaman, they would attack you. These are Crusaders. They're witch hunters. If you did not have that, then they would pass you by. Boop, boop, boop. And if that was the case, they would head for the nearest Crusader village. So we wound up having some pretty big villages, and I probably should have docked people points for that. The Dreadlord is like, okay, first of all, kick these human Crusaders out. I appreciate you leveling the dwarves and Carnadium, but you're letting these Crusaders into my domain. Come on now, come on. I appreciate that I'm richer than I was a month ago, but you guys, you gotta defend the home turf. Very interesting stuff. Interesting experience. Would I want to repeat it? No. Did I have a good time? Yes, I did. Did I learn a little bit more about how to integrate this? And that's the big thing. The one biggest disappointment I had is it would have been great to do this and analyze things and resolve it one day at a time and release the results one day at a time. Then you could have had DM say, listen, my people want to come and they want to raid Garrick Bloodtide's village. And I could tell them what was in there. But given the need to do weekly turns and to publish them, and the other thing is I didn't want to go into 2023. I didn't want my players going into 2023 with this hanging over their heads. I wanted to do the final resolution before Christmas so that people could just put it behind them and move on. And so that kind of precluded the ability for outside tables to impact the game itself. But I didn't see any way around it. I really think that we learned some valuable lessons from this, particularly when it comes to the idea of, as with Brovenloft, these big month-long events are great. You do them 3 or 4 times a year and they work fine, but I think any more than 4 weeks, and really it was 4.5 weeks, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but 4 times 7 is 28. We still had the 29th, 30th, and 31st to resolve. So 4.5 weeks, that's really about enough. Your circadian rhythm tells you after that 4.5 weeks, timeout. I need to take a breather. Can we just go back to take a little downtime, just sit on a beach, go swimming with the sea turtles, just relax, and then we'll come back, we'll do this again soon. That's really the way to run it. That's it. That's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments section. I'm praying for you.